In 1993. Well, it changed so much. First of all, there was not a single Jew living in the town. There's still about 5,000 Goyim living there. I mean, the Ukrainians. The Poles were kicked out. You know, there were no Poles. And this is another thing when we talk about, you know, Arabs in Israel. There are, what, 20% of Arabs still are citizens of Israel, and nobody kicked them out. Those who stayed, and they became citizens. But in the Ukraine, when we were there were many Poles living there. It was Poland. But the Ukrainians, as soon as they took over after the war, they kicked out all the Poles. There's no Polish people there. So there are no Jews and no Poles, just Ukrainians. And I felt very uneasy to talk to them because I always thought about, you know, I'm talking to this young guy, I wonder what his father did to my family, you know. So you always crosses your mind. Because they are the ones that they were collaborating with the Nazis, as I mentioned, and they killed most of our people. Most of the Jews were killed by the Ukrainians. So I felt very uneasy, you know. But our home was destroyed. They built a post office on the ground that we owned, and we were a wealthy family before the war. We had a whole block belonged to us. You know, it was the real estate that belonged to us, and it was destroyed. They built a post office on the grounds that we owned. And then we wanted to see the cemetery. I always wanted to see the cemetery because I remember my grandmother, when she died, and I was, in 1936, I was 5 years old, but I do remember to this day, you know, when she died. And then I remember the matzeva that they put up, the stone that was put up, and I remember what a beautiful stone. Her name was Yona. And Yona, you know what a Yona means? And you know what Yona means? What? Dove. A dove. So there were two beautiful doves on the stone, and I remember that as a 6-year-old. And I thought, I'll go to the cemetery and maybe find her stone, you know, my grandmother's. And guess what? No cemetery. They destroyed every stone in the cemetery. There was nothing, not one stone left. I don't know what they did with it, but I couldn't find a single stone. So even the graveyards, you know, were destroyed. Everything was destroyed. So
what you're listing, it's not just in his town, it's everywhere. Everywhere.
They're the same everywhere. Then I found the mass grave of the last 1,500 Jews, not 1,100 Jews, a year later, and I know the date when they were killed. It was July 16th, 1942. The Ukrainians took him out of the shtetl to the next town, which is Stanislavov, which is called Ivano-Frankovsk now. And I went to see the place where they were killed. And I'm not going to describe to you because it was described to me how they did it, how they destroyed the people, and I cannot. It's too much. I don't think it's. You should. I don't want to make it graphic because it's too much. And they killed 11, and then they buried them in the cemetery. And this is where I found the grave. So we now put up a matzeva. We put up a stone there, a monument, a beautiful monument. I have pictures of it here. This was, and it took another 10 years to do it. You know, this was 93. In 2003, I went back again to dedicate the monument on that place where we know this is where they're buried. And very, very sad part. So it was not. But this time we did go back. We weren't. I wasn't afraid as an American go back and talk to some of the people. And I just recognized maybe two things. I remember the place where the mikveh was. So I recognized that. It's still there, but it's not a mikveh. I don't know what it is in there. And then also the drugstore next door to us was a drugstore, and that's still there. But it's not a drugstore. It's just somebody living there. and I recognized that. But otherwise, and the church is still there, you know. So I recognized the church in a couple of places, and I also knew, I knew the place where our home was because there was a well when we lived. In our home was, and then outside the backyard was we had a well. This is where we drew water. We didn't have running water at that time, and now it looked like a dog house. You know, it's covered up. And I said to Simona, I says, I could see, because I could tell the church. You know, it's through triangulation. You know, I said, okay. I used to look at the church, and I could see the steeple when I was a kid, so I recognized that. And I said, let me go to the spot where I could recognize the distance where I remember the steeple was. So I sure found that plot. And a little bit further is I saw that like a doghouse. And I says, I bet you this is the well. And sure enough, I uncovered it, and this was our well. So that's how I knew this is where our home was. But it has changed completely, and I could not recognize anything else except these few things. That was it. I don't ever want to go back there again.
Do you have any question, Evelyn? Do you have anything?
Questions?
About Yiddish? She's researching a lot about Yiddish.
Yiddish? Yeah.
She's looking up all the words and stuff like this.
Yes. You can ask me about that. This is my Mameloshen. You should remember that word Mameloshen, 2 words, which means mother tongue. Mother tongue. Lashon and Mama. Mameloshen. Mother's tongue. So, Yiddish is my... I can still speak it, but I don't, so I don't use it. With Mother, I used to, when she was alive, we used to speak Yiddish. But she also spoke English very well. She lived to be 102, and she died at Hooverwood here, the nursing home. She was 102 years old. And I told you that I ate non-kosher food at the time, but my mother never touched non-kosher food. In the 4.5 years we were in Kazakhstan, the Soviet Union, she was a complete vegetarian, never touched it. Even though there was a shoichet, I think I may have mentioned it, there was a shoichet there too, but she didn't trust him because she saw him come out of a non-kosher place, a restaurant which had not kosher, and she said, I don't trust him, because even once in a big while, if you would get a chicken somewhere, Dad would go out to the farms and maybe trade for a chicken, she wouldn't eat it, you know. So that's, and she, as I said, and she lived to be 102, so God rewarded her.
Okay, they will keep working on their project for several weeks more, and I'll give you. Yeah, we will invite you when it's all done,
and good.
I'll show you the links of their project. We worked all together with other teachers on it,
yes.
So they'll do pretty good research, and hopefully it's going to be tradition for 7th graders next year again. We'll do it, so kids, they will know what happened.
You're talking about Yiddish. You know who does speak Yiddish in this community?
The
Schusterman, that's right, and also the Grossbaums, the Lubavitcher teach their talk Yiddish to their children.
No.